It's about time to get started with our Bible class. We'll give everybody just a second to get seated. I need a bullhorn, don't I? Do what? Going to get loud. Everybody's having a big time, aren't they? That's all right. Huh? Yeah. All right, we'll get started in 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. Everybody acts like they're glad to see each other today. I'm glad to see that. That is great. It's the way it should be. 2 Timothy chapter 3. All right, last week we began this. We'll review quickly and then pick up. It said, but know this, that the last days perilous times will come. And he begins a list of things, the problems that would happen during the last times. And we dealt with the fact that we are in the last times. It's not some mythical moment that's going to happen right before Jesus returns. We looked at a lot of scripture to prove that we are in the last days. We're in the last dispensation of time. There's not going to be any more. When this one's over, it's over. But Paul tells Timothy that in the last days, in your life, really, in essence, is all he's saying, when the time that you're going to preach, these are some of the problems you're going to deal with. And he wants him to be prepared. He wants him to know how to deal with them. He says some people will be lovers of themselves, and we talked about that. They'll be selfish. Same problem today. Nothing different. He says some people will be boasters. Some people will be proud and blasphemers. People are going to have all kinds of these problems. Some people are going to think too highly of themselves. Some people are going to be filled with pride. Some people are going to talk evil about other people. He said some people are going to be disobedient to their parents. We dealt with that. Some people are going to be unthankful. That's where we wound up, unthankful. We talked about the fact in Romans 1, God gave up on people because of two things we said at the end of class. They didn't glorify God as who he was, and they were not thankful. So God takes thankfulness very, very seriously. He goes on to say some people will be unholy. When you think about unholy, it's just simply to not act like God. God is holy. God does what is right. And if we are not that, then we are acting the opposite of God. Now, I already said last week, and I still hold to it this week, every one of us at different times in our life, different seasons of our lives, we do those things, don't we? Every one of them. And Paul is telling Timothy, you know, this is going to happen and you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to preach sermons, Timothy, you know, on people being selfish. You're going to have to preach sermons on pride. You're going to have to preach sermons on being thankful. Why? Because we got to be reminded over and over and over again, right? Because we're going to continually do the things that are not right. He says some people are going to be unloving. Another translation is going to be, say, without natural affection. Are people unloving today? You know people that are unloving? Do you know people that don't have natural affection? It's kind of odd, isn't it? Isn't it odd that today a mother can give birth to a child and not care anything about the child? That's what he's talking about. Without natural affection. Isn't that supposed to be the most natural thing on the face of the earth? You give birth to a child, you love that child, and you would give your life for that child in an instant. But he says people are going to be to the point that, what's the problem? Go back to the first one. They love themselves. People love themselves sometimes so much that they can't naturally love someone else because they always put themselves first. And Paul tells Timothy we can't be like that. We've got to recognize that, and we've got to work on it. He says some people are going to be unforgiving. In fact, the better translation is going to say truce breakers. It's one who cannot be persuaded to enter into a covenant, or one that's going to be untrue to his promises. Are there people like that today? That they're just not people that's going to keep their word. If you're a truce breaker, that's what That's what you are. Somebody won't keep their word. You won't make a promise and keep it. You won't do anything that you say. He says, don't be that. And I know I'm rushing through this, but we've talked about all these things many times. He says some people are slanderers or are false accusers. Isn't that what Satan's called? Isn't Satan a slanderer? Isn't Satan a false accuser? Do we ever do that? I want to read you something. It says, one who slanders another is attempting for whatever reason to injure the victim. Oftentimes, hurtful stories are spread by thoughtless people who may not be consciously trying to damage the victim. The key to overcoming this evil habit is to be aware of the result. The victim is hurt, his influence for good is perhaps destroyed, and the talker is placed in danger of losing his own soul. Have you ever told something on somebody that wasn't true because you heard it? And what happens? Hurts that person, right? Damages their influence. What's the best thing we can do when we're told something on somebody else? Just forget it, right? Forget it. If it's a concern to you, then why don't you just go ask the person? If somebody told me something on Reed over here and it's something I just couldn't believe, the best thing I can do if it's going to bother me is go ask Reed, isn't it? Set him down and say, Reed, this is what I was been told. He said, well, that's a lie. Okay, that's fair enough. Going about my business. But what happens when I go and I spread it? Then he's hurt. He's hurt. And why do we like to do that? I don't know. Matthew 7:12, treat everybody like you want to be treated. That is not how I want to be treated, but sometimes that's how we do things. He says some people are going to have a lack of self-control. Lack of self-control. It says those who are incontinent or have a lack of self-control do not possess the strength to restrain themselves, giving their natural appetites and emotions free rein. Those who demand the most freedom are usually those who can control themselves the least. Isn't that right? That's the way it goes a lot of times. And Paul tells Timothy we can't do that. He says some people are going to be brutal. Some people are going to be fierce, other translations say. And, you know, the gospel is supposed to produce gentleness. But at times in our lives, are we not kind of fierce with people? Are we not brutal? You ever heard the term brutally honest? You ever been brutally honest with somebody? Yeah. It may have been the truth, but in the way that you presented it, the way that you said it, all it did is hurt people. It says one who is combative, abusive, troublemaking, who lives with anger in his heart toward others, has not cultivated the grace of gentleness. Even in the height of a public discussion, a mature saint will conduct himself appropriately. There is never room for animal-like savagery in the life of a Christian. You ever having a biblical discussion with somebody and they disagree with you? Have you ever become angry, ill, hateful, and totally unchristlike talking to someone? That's what he's talking about. And we can become that. The gospel, we are supposed to be gentle people. The third beatitude is blessed are the meek. What does the meek mean? Gentle, right? Broken. Strength under control. It's not somebody that's just brutal and out of control. He goes on to say, some people are despisers of that which is good. Do you know people that it just seems that they hate everything that's good in life? And they stand against anything that is good and right. And we live in a society today that's what happens. Anytime that people stand up for what is good and biblical and right, don't people mock us and ridicule us and talk about us and belittle us and call us hate groups and all of those other sorts of things? Paul told Timothy that's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's because there's great prejudice against the church. People don't like the church. People don't like God. People don't like restraint. People don't like rules. People don't like to be told what to do. Why? You know, realize every one of these goes back to the first one because people are lovers of themselves. Every one of them goes back to that one. They all do. He goes on to say, people are traitors. People are traitors. You ever been betrayed? by somebody that you trusted, that you loved, that you thought you were close to, that you'd shared things with, and you've been betrayed. Hurts, doesn't it? Treason. How big of a crime is treason? Huge, right? Why? Because it's a betrayal. They're a traitor. And God wants us to not be those types of people. Betrayal hurts. Man, if you've ever been betrayed by somebody, it hurts. And he says, don't do that. He says, headstrong. Sometimes I'm a little bit headstrong. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I'm rash and I'm reckless and I'm always in a hurry. I'm always in a hurry my whole life. Every day I'm in a hurry. And it gets me in trouble sometimes. You ever been like that? Probably you have, right? And it's something that we need to work on. I want to read this to you. It says, it is opposed to that which is deliberate and calm. It here means that men would be ready to do anything without deliberation or concern for the consequences. They would engage in enterprises which would only disturb society or prove to their own ruin. That's what Albert Barnes says. Sometimes when we're headstrong, we rush into things without thinking, and then we have to just live with whatever comes, and that gets you in trouble. And Paul's telling Timothy, you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to work on that. He says some people are haughty. Some people are conceited. Some people are arrogant. You ever heard this phrase, I'd like to buy them for what they're worth and sell them for what they think they're worth? I know some people I'd like to do that to, right? I could make a lot of money. But Paul is telling Timothy, that's going to happen. You're going to deal with people like this. And we're about to find out in just a moment, all of these things that he's talking about, you're going to deal with people that are Christians. That's going to have these issues, these problems, and you're going to have to work through them. And sometimes we can be haughty. Sometimes we can be, the person that thinks he's a little bit better than others. And I want you to notice something. He says here haughty. Just a little bit earlier, he says boasters. A little bit after that, he says proud. Doesn't all these things tie in together? And he began with lovers of themselves. Doesn't that all? It just all describes the same type of attitude. Yeah, Pharisaical. Can you sometimes and me sometimes be Pharisaical? Yeah. Have the look at me attitude? Yeah. And Jesus said, Matthew 5:20, except your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, what does he say? You're not going where? You're not going to heaven, are you? He says, if you can't beat what they're doing, you're not going to heaven. So if you've got the haughty, proud, arrogant, boastful attitude, look at me and what I'm doing, and I'm better than you, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It never worked, and it never will work. He says, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Now, can that be good things and bad things? If you love sinful pleasure more than God, of course that's bad, right? That's an obvious one. But can I love good things and they come in between me and God? Yeah. There's a lot of things that I love to do, right? And you've got things that you love to do. Can those things become in between you and God? Is it pretty easy? Pretty easy, isn't it? It's pretty easy to allow what I want to do to interfere with what I should be doing. And so sometimes we look at things like that and we think, well, as long as I'm just not, I'm not over here doing this bad thing, then I'm okay. Well, sometimes some good things. I heard Brother Tom Holland one time in a lesson. And in that lesson, he said this. He said, I spent so much of my time trying to convert everybody in the world that he said, I lost my family. Lost his wife, his kids, split up. He said, because I spent so much time trying to help and convert everybody else, come in between him, right? And it cost him so much. Good thing, great thing, the best thing you could do, you would think, but it cost him his marriage and his home. So sometimes it's not just bad things. Sometimes it's very, very good things that happen in our life that can put distance between us and God. All right, verse 5. He says, some of these people, they have a form of godliness. He says, but they deny its power. And he says, and from such people turn away. What does it mean to have a form of godliness? Living two lives. I want to ask you this, though. Anybody in here ever lived two lives? Nobody wants to admit that part, right? Toby will. You raised your hand, buddy. Oh, all right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everybody's going to struggle with, aren't they? Yeah. And he says some people, they have a form of godliness. They seem to be a Christian, and they want to do it, but you know, they're tied up with all these other things too. If you have a form of godliness, but you deny its power, what does the gospel, what's the power of the gospel? What's it supposed to do to us? What does the gospel do for us? It saves us, but it makes us what? Better. Should make us better, right? Do we not grow as a Christian? Should we not get better at certain things in our lives? We should. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we go the opposite direction. You know, and that's what he's talking about. If you've got a form of godliness, but you deny its power, and you say the gospel can't help me, and I can't overcome this, I can't do anything different, I'm just going to roll right along in what I'm doing, you're denying the power that's found therein. And he says, if you've got somebody like that thinks I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and it really doesn't matter what you say, he says, then those types of people, he says, you're going to have to be careful with. He says, you're going to have to avoid. You're going to have to try to, do something to those types of people. Maybe whether it be church discipline, Romans 16, verse 17, note the people that do that. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, deliver them to Satan, whatever it may be. But he says, if somebody's denying its power and saying that the gospel can't help them and they're going to live however they want to, he says those people are in trouble. Not to say, see, sometimes what we do is we look at this and we say, well, the Bible says if you ever have a problem with pride to avoid you, well, I'd have to avoid everybody, right? And you'd have to avoid me. Because we all have it from time to time. It's a habitual walk in it, and I don't care, who likes it or what, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm denying the power of the gospel. I'm denying that it can change me. And in doing so, that's a problem. The gospel has power. I wrote myself a note here. If you've got a tree, and you plant a tree, and that tree is beside your driveway, slowly, what do those tree roots do to your driveway? They'll bust your concrete, won't they? Can a dandelion grow up through concrete? Something small can do amazing things, right? The gospel can do amazing things. It's like that root. It's like that flower, that plant. God even says the gospel, it's like a mustard seed, right? But it grows into an enormous plant, and it has the power to do what it sets out to do, but you and I sometimes restrain that power because we don't want to give in to what it says. All right. Verse 6, he says, from this sort, what is he talking about? People that deny the power of the gospel, people that want to live and do whatever they want to do and just go with that. From this sort are those who creep into households, and they make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. Sometimes people look at this and they think God's got a vendetta against women, right? He's saying women are gullible. Are women gullible sometimes? So are men, you're right. I think as Burton Kaufman said, women are gullible, otherwise a man would never get a wife. You got to trick him into marrying you, but probably true. But what he's talking about here is you've got certain people that will take advantage of gullible people. Does that happen? Are there some people in the world, they'll believe whatever you want to throw at them if you'll make it sound good? He's saying these types of people that are going to live however they want to live, these are the things that they're going to do. They're going to try to prey on gullible people. You ever known someone that tries to prey on people? People that they know that they can influence and they can change. And if you begin to do that and you begin to change people, then things are not good. And that's what he's talking about. He says you've got to be careful with these types of things. You've got to look for these people that are gullible, that are believing these lies, Timothy, and you've got to help to correct that. He says, some of these people that are gullible, some of these types of people, they're always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. You ever known anybody like that? It seems like they always want to hear something new, and they're always eager to know anything that comes down the line, and they just want to eat it up and take it in, but they just seem that they can never settle on anything as being absolute. They're always looking for something new. Isn't that how the people were on Mars Hill? Then the Apostle Paul says they were eager to hear something new, something different. Just wanted something else because they never could settle on, hey, this is it. You and I have got to be a people that is going to settle on this is it. Not going to be any new revelation, not going to hear anything that I've never heard before. If I do, then you better be careful about it. You better back up and check it. Verse 8, he says, now as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds disapproved concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. These two guys in verse 8, I have no idea who they are. They're not in the Old Testament. Yeah, they're probably, yes, magicians. But the Bible doesn't talk about them. You won't find their names in the Old Testament. Apparently this is from Hebrew history here that Paul is quoting from. But it really doesn't matter. What these two guys did is they resisted Moses. What did Moses have? The truth, right? Moses had the truth revealed unto God, and these people didn't want to hear the truth, so they resisted the truth. Paul tells Timothy there's going to be people just like these guys, and they're going to resist the truth. They're going to be people of corrupt minds, people that resist the truth. It's because they don't like the truth. It's because their mind wants to go back to the first thing in their list. They love themselves more than they love God. He says they are disapproved concerning the faith. They can't be approved by God. If you've got a corrupt mind, if you're not going to resist the truth, you can't be approved by God. But verse 9, he says, but they will progress no further. Don't worry. Sometimes we worry about things like that, don't we? You ever think that some of these people are going to win from time to time? You know, these movements that come along, and sometimes you hear lessons, and the lessons presents the church is, man, we're in such trouble, and things are changing. In 20 more years, it won't be here anymore, right? You ever heard it presented like that? Yeah. What's he say? That's not true. That's never been true. The church is going to stand for how long? Till the end, right? That's it. Daniel 2, verse 44, it's the everlasting kingdom. It's not going away. It's not going to be taken over by somebody else. It's never going to end. It doesn't matter if this church over here starts being liberal and this and starts being liberal, and they bring all of these things in. Church is not going anywhere. And so we need to get rid of that negative mindset. Yes, we've got to deal with all the issues, but at the same time, Paul tells Timothy, they're not going to progress. It's not going to win. Their folly will be manifest to all. People are going to see through it. The church is going to continue on, but you can't worry about it. You can't allow yourself to be consumed with all of these things. He goes on to tell him, but you have carefully followed my doctrine. Well, that's a compliment, isn't it? For somebody to tell you that. You have followed my doctrine, my manner of life, my purpose, my faith, my long-suffering, my love, my perseverance, persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me at Antioch and Iconium and Lystra. What persecutions I endured, and out of them all, the Lord delivered me. Paul tells Timothy, you'd follow me through everything that I've went through, and I'm going to help you to get through what you're going to face. I appreciate your attention. We'll pick up next week.